The Podcasting Morning Show is your morning meetup where podcasting meets purpose and creativity, sparking connection. Hosted by Mark Ronick, with 2 decades of experience, and elevated by a team comprised of award-winning podcasters, accomplished entrepreneurs and producers, and podcast hosts with years of experience. Together, they form the backbone of the Podcasting Morning Chat, diving into the nuts and bolts of content creation, sharing real-life challenges, solutions, and success stories. Streaming live every weekday at 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time from Clubhouse, yes, Clubhouse, and available as a podcast just a couple of hours later, the show has evolved into a go-to resource for content creators worldwide. Imagine a mastermind group's collaborative spirit combined with the engaging vibe of a morning drive radio show. That's what we're all about. Learn more at www.podcastingmorningshow.com.
Most new podcasters think they need the perfect setup, the perfect strategy, or the perfect first episode before they can finally hit publish. But the truth is, every creator starts messy, every creator starts uncertain, and most people quit long before they ever give themselves the chance to improve. In this episode, I'm joined by Heather Herrington for an honest conversation about what it really feels like to build a podcast in real time. We talk about failing forward, imperfect growth, creator overwhelm, finding your voice, and why authenticity matters more than trying to sound polished. Because podcasting isn't really about perfection. It's about learning how to keep showing up long enough to become who you're trying to become. If you've ever felt stuck, discouraged, or afraid to put your work out into the world, this conversation is for you. Okay, Heather, thank you so much again for taking the time to do this.
Yeah.
The whole purpose of starting this podcast was that I wanted to help educate new and aspiring podcasters getting into this game on what they're about to face when they get started. I'm going to start out with the question I've asked every other podcast host that I've had on. We're going to start. This is our vibe. When you have an idea, you have something or a topic I could really dig into, why sit down and say, let me do a podcast? Why not start with a blog or start with just creating YouTube videos? Why sit down and do the work of doing a whole podcast?
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to hear what other podcasters have to say about it.
So unlike a lot of wow, I can't talk today. Unlike a lot of podcasters, I did actually start with a blog. But unfortunately, we kind of live in a world where they're in their car, they're doing things, they don't have time to sit down and read an article. I mean, how many times have you looked up a recipe and you're going through these food bloggers and you're like, I really don't care that this was like your Nona's recipe passed down from like 7 generations. I just want to know how to air fry salmon correctly. So it started off as a blog just because I've always really loved writing, and it was documenting my journey with borderline personality disorder. And when I had first thought that I had it, I Googled it and, got on discussion boards and stuff like that. And this was back in 2018. So it was still very villainized. It's come a long, long way in like 8 or 9 years. And for that, I am incredibly grateful. At the time, it wasn't that well known, well spoken of. It still isn't, but we're getting somewhere. So this was just documenting my journey in therapy every week. And I was going through DBT group therapy. And for those that don't know what DBT is, it's dialectal behavioral therapy, I believe. I probably said the first word wrong, but here we are. And I just kind of went through that. And then I kind of stopped that in 2020. Because I wasn't in therapy as much. Also, I was just kind of like evolving, and, COVID hit, and I was just like the rest of the world, tapped out. Fast forward 3 years. Well, my best friend, Justin, who has always had more faith in my entire being than I do in my pinky toe, my entire body.
You need those people. You need those people, though.
I do. I do, because this wouldn't have existed without them. So him and his wife, Rose, have always been like, you need to start a podcast. You need to start a podcast. I'm like, no. And this was back when podcasting first started taking off. So 2020 through 2023, everyone's like, you need to do it. You need to do it. And I'm like, nah. Fast forward to April, end of March, April. So right around this time, 3 years ago, I was out in LA visiting Justin and his wife Rose and our really good friend Dan. And I was standing in the doorway of Dan's bedroom and Justin was in there and we were just like all chit-chatting. And I looked at Justin and I don't know why I asked. I was like, hey, do you have any mic recommendations? And he was like, you going to finally start the podcast? And I'm like, I'm going to start the podcast. And I really thought it was just going to be like a quick little thing to like shut everyone up. And then I found what I want to do for the rest of my life. So here we are 3 years later as of next month. And I find that podcasting, one, is getting with the times. Because again, nobody in their car is reading a blog. And if you are, stop doing that. And, I feel like I can reach more people because, even if you can listen to me like word for word, or if it's a little more background noise because of, neurodivergency or something, it's more accessible. Everyone's on podcasts, everyone's on YouTube. Like that's the new thing that people are doing if they're not listening to like a music playlist. So for me, it felt it's kind of evolved over the last 3 years as to why I do this, but it was really just to reach more people, especially with why I do this in the first place.
I like the fact that you said, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and go do it. People have been bugging me about it. And I see that a lot. I see that a lot when on social media. I will see people say, hey, friends and family said I should start a podcast. And even going about the route you did of starting a blog and then transitioning into doing something like this, it kind of leads me now into the next question about how do you develop enough content material, right, to sustain? Because you can go on any podcasting platform, type in random podcast name, and you will find, endless amounts of podcasts that have the dreaded 4, 5, 6 episode limit where they stop. And these weren't limited series. These were, podcasts that people sat down, started, and they never get to episode 7, 8, or 9. So how do you develop the content that's going to find something that's sustainable, especially with a topic or niche like you're in? Because there's a lot you have to be able to express when you're talking about a particular subject matter like this.
I think the biggest thing is, the one good thing for me is there are a couple of like things that will never die when it comes to podcasting. That is pop culture and mental health. I think if you do a blog or not a blog, if you do a podcast on pop culture and what's going on with like, even if you just stick to like a specific channel, like if you just stick to Bravo, there will always be a show. There will always be something pop culture-y to chit chat about. The same with mental health. Mental health is constantly evolving. It is constantly changing. It is, we are discovering more and more diagnoses every time we turn around, / finding new treatment options, stuff like that. But I think the big part of why this got started and why I've been able to stick with it so long is I just started with my own story. I started with basically kind of going back off of my old blog posts just for like a little refresher. Spoiler alert, I couldn't find the blog anywhere. Unfortunately, I had to just go from memory. I kind of went back through like the different characteristics and stuff like that. And once I had hit the end of season 1, I was like, it can't just be me talking about my journey anymore because I'm not in the thick of it. And that's when I was like, I had to pivot. I had to bring people on. I had to find more guests. I had to find more material. And I think the short way of answering your question is you have to be willing to pivot. That's how you keep your content. You have to be willing to pivot. You have to constantly be moving. It's like waves in an ocean. It's just constantly, you have to constantly be ready for the next wave, ride that next wave. And when that wave is starting to go down, you turn around and you look for the next one. Authenticity, because anyone can just ride a wave and keep going and going and going. But if you have to find something that is very true to yourself and things that you are very passionate about and go with that. And sometimes that means that you're going to get less views and stuff like that. But at the same time, every big podcaster that I've ever seen interview and stuff like that, like for example, the girls from The Toast, it's a big podcast now. They have flat out, I was at a forum, I was at Dear Media IRL in Austin, Texas a couple of years ago, and they were kind of like the headliners. And they were literally flat out saying, we were nobodies for 6 years before we made it big. So these big overnight successes, you look back, they've got hundreds of episodes where nobody was listening to them. Nobody. So if like, that's the thing, you have to kind of just stay the course because eventually, like you were saying, there's all these podcasts at 4 or 6 episodes, like maybe 20, maybe you see a few that hit 100 and it just falls off the track. You have to pivot. You have to be able to ride the wave and anticipate the next one coming in. And you have to be able to understand that those 7 loyal listeners for that first year and a half those are your ride or dies. And those are the people that you're going to be appreciative of when you hit 700, 7,000, whatever. Those are going to be the people that you are so grateful for when you're in the thick of it and you're like, 7's not enough. 7 got you to that 70 and that 700. So you have to like kind of lean into where you are and enjoy the moment kind of deal.
Yeah. So that you hit on a few things that I really want to go into. Number one, this show is intended for the new podcaster, because I know a lot of the seasoned podcasters out there, especially once you get into the realm of 200, 300 episodes, somewhere around there, you know your flow, you know how everything goes. You're constantly learning.
Mm-hmm.
You understand you have to do what you said, you have to pivot. But when you sit down for the first time and you have the idea, you say, okay, I've got my content down. One of the things that I really want to question how you set up for you, but how do you sit down and say, this is going to be my show format? Because a lot of podcasters go, I don't know where to start. Yeah, I got a great microphone now, right? I might have this, but how do I format what I'm going to present that will eventually, even if you might start out with 2 or 3 listeners, will eventually be able to gain traction? Because that's another one that I see a lot of podcasters who don't quite understand. Like, hey, am I doing a solo show? Am I doing an interview show? Am I doing, a series of the subject matter? Or, yeah, even like in the case that, that you mentioned there was, you have to understand that maybe your content is going to have to shift at some point. So how do you format your show to say, okay, I think I can do this in a way that's going to be manageable? Because for most podcasters, we are starting out. We have other jobs, we have other careers, we have other things in our lives that'll be, again, maintainable to keep recording and doing these things over and over and over again. So what is that like? How was that for Heather? And what would you express to any other new podcasters who might be sitting down thinking about starting theirs tomorrow?
2 words, and I'll give it context, but fail forward. It's very much I'm 120 episodes in, and I'm still, I finally have an outro that I've used for the last 5 episodes maybe, that I'm just like, it's the tagline I used when I was streaming on TikTok. Let's put it on the podcast so that people know that the episode's ending, because it would just kind of end. And then I'm like, no, I need to give people like a sign off kind of thing. An intro, do your prep work when you're doing guests, when you're doing a solo. You just kind of try different things until you find something that works, because what's going to work for me is there's going to be somebody that listens that's going to be like, I would never in a million years do it that way. But, and I know that because I've heard some people's systems and I'm like, no, but it's what works for them. But also guesting on other podcasts help you kind of figure out what works for you as well, because you actually get to see in real time how people are doing things, whether you have a guest form, whether you decide to do a prep call. Because for me, the prep calls are huge. Some people love to do their research on a guest and go in, I guess, quote unquote, blind and do almost like a cold episode and just go from there. I have too much anxiety. So for me, it's like we're doing a prep call. We're doing a 30-minute call real quick where we can kind of go over ideas. What about the guest is completely off limits for them, because we're talking mental health. It's a little bit easier if you're just like getting somebody on talking pop culture. And I'm not saying that's easy at all, but I'm saying there's a little less prep in it. But with mental health, it's like you have to make sure that certain things are, absolute no-goes. Like for me, my personal absolute no-goes are, we are not talking about my guest kids in detail at all. We can gloss over it, but I'm not getting into somebody's minor children's life. They're not old enough to consent, blah, 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 blah. I also know that if my parents had talked about me on a podcast and I heard it a few years later, would not have gone over well. So, it's just for me, I really like those prep calls where I can sit, I can break the ice. I can just chit chat with somebody, get their vibe, so I can figure out what kind of host I'm going to be for that episode. Do I need to be a little more serious? Can I be a little more, sarcastic in myself? Or do I need to, If somebody's a little more religious and I have clocked that, do I limit the amount of cussing I do or just don't do it at all? Is it somebody that I'm not going to care if there's like an F-bomb or two thrown, like no big. And so for me, those prep calls are huge for my preparation and my success for an episode. But also somebody may think of a prep call and go, that's a lot of work. I don't have that kind of schedule. That's fine. But for me, that's what works.
Yeah. And you made mention of this, and I've had other podcast hosts come on that, yes, the validation system really does help in developing whether or not, hey, this guest would be great to come on. There's a great chemistry there. There's a lot that we can, we'll be able to express or talk about, because I've also heard the horror stories of other podcasters who I've had on. They were like, I just had this guy on a blind invite that somebody, made a recommendation about, and it was the worst. The conversation didn't flow at all. He was a jerk. She was just whatever that really made it uncomfortable. So you did make mention, and I like the fact that you do this, especially in the genre that you're doing, because in some different areas and niches that you're going to be creating podcasts, it's going to be important to know that your person that you're having, your expert or your subject matter expert you're having on, really knows what they're talking about. This was easier for me because I had a track record of all the podcasters I've had on. There was a reason that I asked for a certain amount, because I had a catalog to go back and say, okay, they've done this. I've heard them. I could go back and listen to them. I don't need to sit down and have a 30-minute sit down. I can hear, the 100 hours that they've spent doing this. I trust in that process for them. Having new people on, that's going to be different. And I like the fact that you made mention of that, because there's some people that don't. I'm going to tell you, there's podcasters I wouldn't believe said, I don't have a guest validation system. I just have them on and we have conversation. And I go, I've done that. That's kind of scary.
I learned that the hard way. There are about 4 or 5 episodes that will never see the light of day, because even with vetting them, the things that came out while recording, I was like, nope. Right. And it actually has nothing to do with politics. It has everything to do with some of their viewpoints on like humanity as a whole, that I was just like I fitness coaches are very, they have a very thin line. And there were a couple that were on that was like, I can't post that because I can't believe you're saying that about your clients. And I don't want to be associated with that. So you learn very quickly, like, to trust what you see on people's social media before you have them on, and stuff like that. But those prep calls are a lifesaver, especially if you're a newbie podcaster and you just trust that everyone's like, going to come on and sound fantastic. But then it's also good for like breaking the ice with people. Some people have a lot of anxiety about being on. So if you break the ice with them and they feel like they know you before they come on, you're going to get more than 3-word answers out. Or you got the ones that sound amazing on paper, but you're getting them on a prep call and they're like, I'm good. So we can talk about that. And you're just like, this is not going to be nails on a chalkboard for 15 minutes. I'm sorry. You're wonderful on paper, but this is just not going to work moving forward.
So that makes mention of another thing too, that we talk about here on the show. Prior to doing this, did you have any kind of background in, say, doing interviewing or doing anything along these lines? Or was it a skill that you had to develop as you went along? Because we do have people that come on and like, hey, I was in radio 5 years before I started podcasting. So it was okay for them to hop into a medium like this. But for some people, it's like, I knew nothing.
Yeah.
So what was that like for when you started?
I was a certified yapper. I was the kid that just didn't stop talking, which is great for solo episodes, not so great when you have a guest and you have to shut up. So I've really honed in on my active listening skills. But leave it. Sorry, hang on. Leave it. Thank you. When I just had zero experience with that, other than I just like to talk. Hang on, I lost my train of thought. I'm so sorry. How do I want to say this?
I'll take your time. That's the magic of editing.
She's an angel 9 times out of 10. Today's the 1 out of 10 she decides to be.
Oh, don't worry. Trust me. My dog, I had to put him away because when I record with him in here, he can be a menace.
She's usually right here or right on her chair and doesn't move. So we're going to lose our office privileges, I feel, just for a couple of days. So honestly, overall, I didn't really have any experience other than I did theater. I guess that was my only experience. I did theater for a few years. So being on stage and being in front of people and having to, improv on a dime and, dealing with, if you've been in theater, that something on the set won't work. Somebody forgets their lines. You have to ad lib because somebody said their line wrong, so you learn those quick thinking, like pivot on a dime. I keep saying pivot. I'm like Ross from Friends. You just learn to improv and be more impromptu and kind of take anything that's going to come at you, because again, the play can be a whole thing and something always goes wrong. There's never been a show that I have done in my life that went perfectly, ever. There's always been something. So for me, this is my stage now. This is where things could go really, really well and it's minimal editing, or things can go really wrong, like it did in earlier seasons before, I got my dog trained, where she would just bark and bark and bark. And I'd have to mute my mic and, try to get her to calm down. And I had to cut a ton because she was just, losing her mind. Now it's a lot easier, and 9 times out of 10, she's chill. But, this is kind of my stage now. But that's really my only experience, is doing a lot of theater in middle and high school.
So you essentially had to learn on the fly. And then what you made mention of, the active listening part, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of people who get into this and they're like, yeah, hey, you know what? I can talk for hours. Great. Again, like you said, solo show, no worries.
Fantastic.
Right. But when you're doing an interview show, it is learning the back and forth of allowing to me, that's the big part of what this show is about, because I want to be able to extract as much as I can from the guests. So you said that, the minimal editing thing. I really want to touch on that as well, because there's always different approaches for podcasters when they get started into this. I've had podcasters on like, it is a religion. You should edit out all the ums, the ahs, and everything else. And I've had others that, editing, what's that? So what was that like when you started doing this, to say, hey, look, I'm either going to spend a lot of time editing, or this is not going to work. I need to do as much as I possibly can, and spend the time and the work to maybe do it on the front end so that you don't have so much to do once you're done recording?
Yeah, so that's actually a really great question, because I feel like everyone has a different opinion on editing and also feels really strongly about that opinion on editing.
Yes, they do.
But when I first started, I was the one that cut out every. I was audio only for the first 2 or 3 seasons, and I would export the file into Audacity and then zoom in on the file, and I mean cut out every single micro silence. Like, I over edited, and for my own sanity, I started being like, you know what? No. So I leave a certain amount of silences in there. I will say I use Riverside to do my podcast, and that's been really great to help with the minimal editing, because you cut out like a certain amount of, I think it's like a second and a half of silence,
right,
or more. That cuts it out. I mean, you can go all the way down to half a second, but I'm just like, no, I want there to be I want it to feel like a conversation and not a long TikTok you're watching on 2 times speed, where it's like ding, 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 ding. So for me, I just kind of hit a point where, well, one, editing's the bane of my existence. I hate editing. Anytime there's a point that I have to actually go in and edit, I'm just like, God hates me. But little dramatic, but I hate editing. My post-production, I would rather be pulling clips and, stuff like that. So for me, I got really lucky with using Riverside, and I feel like this is a total plug for Riverside, but also I feel very strongly about Riverside as a whole as a podcasting platform, and I'm sure we'll get into that. But I heard from a lot of people, I really love your authenticity. I love that it doesn't seem super clean, super this, super that. And the reason I was over editing to begin with is because I was literally saying my first 3 sentences on a microphone for the first time in my life and trying to sound like Call Her Daddy and Joe Rogan and these people that have production teams and perfect lighting and perfect this and perfect that, and people that it's actually their full-time job to do these things. And I'm just like, why am I trying to sound like them right out the gate? Everyone, and I'm telling you right now, everyone is going to look back on their first few episodes, and then once they hit like 200 episodes, look at their 100th episode, and 300, looking at their 200. Like, you just evolve so much that no matter how good you try to make your first few episodes sound, you are going to look back and go, that is the trashiest podcast episode I've ever heard in my life. You just are, because you don't know what you're doing. So my thing was minimal editing, one, for my own sanity, two, so that it sounded like an authentic, non-perfect conversation, especially when you're working in mental health. You don't want it to sound too perfect. You don't want it to sound too like scrubbed up and stuff. You want to hear the emotion. You want to hear people, not that I take like joy in other people's like pain, but you want to hear that emotion because that's what's going to bring your listeners in. Like, oh my God, that person's getting emotional over that. I thought I was being dramatic. I am no longer feeling dramatic. I feel validated. And right then and there is why I do this thing in the first place. So it's selfishly, I edit as little as possible so that I don't throw my computer. But also, I feel like it gives a more genuine take on who I am as a person and who my guest is as a person, because that 45 minutes is probably close to the only time that a lot of listeners are going to have an impression of that guest. And I want it to be the most authentic them impression that I can give.
Yeah. No, that's you worded it perfectly, because when it comes to sitting down and say, I want to do editing or I don't want to do editing, right? You're going to find different schools of thought from different podcasters. If you go to any potential podcasting school, they're going to hammer down on, you need to edit this out. You need to get this out. But then what you made mention of too is that comparatively a lot of podcasters probably have this idea in their head. They've heard the Joe Rogans, they've heard all the bigger shows, and they want to model their idea on formatting how they're going to do their show after that. But they have teams, they have tons of hours, they have people who can do all this stuff for them to make it sound very professional. You, in the beginning, it is going to be terrible. I'm sorry.
Right.
It's going to be terrible. You're going to go back and go, what was I thinking? And that's okay. But the fact that you sat down and did it for 100 episodes to go back and go listen, that is part of the development and the growth. And that's the idea of wanting to do this, is because I don't want podcasters to run into this idea that I have to have this perfect product to push out, because that's the thing that everybody wants, or in their head, they think that's what they want to listen to. But it is the authenticity, the realness that really draws in people to keep them coming back and wanting to listen more and saying, this is great. I've learned so much. I want to come back next week when they release another episode. So I love your approach to it. And for any new podcasters listening, remember that if you've listened to prior episodes, the reason is you're going to get a vast array of perspective. And the thing that we want most of our new listeners to understand is that you don't have to think there's a right or wrong way that this path is going to work for you. What has worked for Heather, what has worked for Kurt, what has worked for Janaid and all the other people that I've had on may not work for you. But maybe the process that you said of cutting back a little bit more on things like saying, I don't maybe have to spend 4 hours on a 15-minute piece of content. That the ROI is not going to be worth it if you're thinking about it in those terms. I wanted to talk about another thing you made mention of. See, this is why I like having podcasters on. And
I know, it's so fun.
They lead you into everything. I don't have to hardly do any work. I'm just here like a vessel.
This is also why I love them.
Exactly. So you made mention of Riverside. I also like to sit down and talk about the different types of softwares that are out there on the market that you can record with. We're using, guys can't see it. If you are, that we're using Riverside to record, but there are other softwares out there to sit down and record with. What were some of the things that you looked into when you were starting, as opposed to as you started to evolve to say, I need an easier process and workflow for recording? Because it can be difficult if you're just going to sit down and say, I can just record it from my phone. That's what a lot of podcasters or these gurus will tell you sometimes. Just start with your phone. Great. But then there comes a point where the phone only has a limitation you can extend upon before you have to say, okay, now I got to sit down and I'm really doing this. I'm already recorded 30 episodes. It's time that I develop a system so I can start using for recording. What were some of the things that you looked into? And what were some of the reasons that you chose a software like Riverside? Because I'm doing a separate show just talking about all the softwares. I'm talking about StreamYard, Stream, Ecamm, using Riverside. There's a multitude that you're going to be able to find. A lot of them have a lot of great features that they're adding. But what was that thought process for you when you said, I'm going to settle on this one?
Yeah. So season 1, I was just recording straight into Spotify, and this was back when you could record straight into Spotify. So, before the dinosaurs. But so that feels like so long ago, because I think it was like a year and a half ago that they're like, yeah, we're teaming up with Riverside and, you can figure it out. But I had, for season 2, this is back when I was doing seasons and not doing regular episodes. For season 2, I knew I wanted more guests. So for me, my holy trinity of software in general, and that includes not only like how I record, edit, all of that, but also how I'm finding guests, is Podmatch, Threads, Riverside. And honestly, Threads is beating out Podmatch by a long shot right now, which at the time, Podmatch really got my start on guests. It really, really did. Now I feel like I post anything on Threads and I'm, getting to the point where I, like you and a couple other podcasters, I'm going to need a form to start weeding through people.
Yes, you have.
Hey, look, Ma, I've made it. But Riverside, for me, you got a lot of features and it was relatively cheap, honestly. And to this day, I still feel like for the amount you pay and the features that you get, when I'm comparing, because there have been a couple times that I've tried to jump ship from Riverside and I've been like, you know what, I'm going to use StreamYard, or I'm going to use Buzzsprout, or I'm going to use, one of these. And when you're looking at the features and then you're looking at the price point, in my opinion, which I cannot say more, my opinion, I feel that Riverside is the best bang for your buck. The features that you're getting versus the price point that you're paying. I'll be fully transparent. I pay for the $30 a month plan, which seems like a lot, except for that comes with the AI editing. And as much as I will still go through and make sure that everything's edited the way I want it to, just being able to take out those silences. And then that also has a feature that it'll mark something that's like, you may not like, this may seem a little like they'll mark it if I don't mark it, because there's certain times where I'm like, yeah, I'm going to have to edit that. And I just mark the clip really quick, which is also super helpful for, an editing process. So you don't have to go back through and go, where was that part where I, hated what I said, so I repeated myself, that kind of thing. Also, you can like mark a clip for something that if your guest is saying something really profound and you're like, that right there, that's what I want to be the clip. But also they will pull the magic clips. So they'll pull clips for you so that all you have to do is kind of go through. And sometimes I miss the mark a little bit. Sometimes I'm like, none of this makes sense. I don't really like, you're always trying to find that 1-minute clip that gives like the entire encapsulation of a 45-minute episode, which by the way is impossible. Don't be me.
Right.
But you still try. You still try every single time. So, it pulls the clips for you. And then I go in and I edit it how I want. I make sure the captions are correct. I make sure that, the layout's right, but it also gives you the option for the different layouts that you want. And you can kind of brand your stuff. And if you've ever used Canva, you know that branding kit part is a godsend, even though I have a love-hate relationship with Canva, So I really feel like, and then the biggest thing that I'm noticing for me is the personalization of the episode descriptions, because I'm like, I want witty, I want sarcastic, I want me, and it goes through. And again, I take the chunk, I edit it so that, it says what I want it to say, because I'm not going to use the 6 paragraphs that it gives me. I'm going to whittle it down to like 1 paragraph or add in some stuff, because again, my big thing is AI is a tool. It is not a solution. I think my biggest fear with ChatGPT as a millennial is in about 25 to 30 years, nobody's going to have an original thought, but that's a day for another episode. I asked ChatGPT if I should eat breakfast this morning. Are you hungry? Then eat it. But some people, again, it's a tool, not a solution, but I really feel like Riverside, for what I pay, it is well worth the $30 a month. And they are constantly adding on new features, and their chat their like help people are always, cannot think of their agents are always super freaking helpful. And I am not a techie person. And when I tell you I actually can use this with ease, I'm not kidding. Like if you handed me a Samsung phone right now, I'd be like, how the hell do you use this? And I know this because my sister has an Android and I'm always like, I'm sorry, how do you find this thing? I'm an iPhone girl until I kick it. But for me, I feel like Riverside is incredibly user-friendly, incredibly helpful. It has a ton of features. And, I just feel like for what I pay, it does a lot of things for me that make that post-production seamless. I don't want to say effortless, because again, there are some times where I have to completely fix an audio out of nowhere that I'm just like, why? But, because it's technology, it's not going to be perfect. But the amount I have to fix it is very minimal compared to the amount of times I just go in and I make sure everything looks good on the episode, and then I can just export it. And now I host on Riverside, which is even better because now I can just send my stuff straight to YouTube instead of manually uploading. Absolute like 10 out of 10 on that one.
Game changer. If you don't know the
Game
struggle,
changer.
you don't know the struggle. So I love that too, that you know, using a tool like this that has a lot of inclusive ways for you to now, what we're going to move into, the distribution part, right? You sat down, you recorded, you had the content, you had the guest on. It was a great conversation.
Yes.
You edited everything together. You think this is a great episode. Now, how do you push it out into the sphere of different social medias, different distribution channels? How do you go about promoting your episodes and your podcast? Because I think those are important as well. I mean, if you want to build attraction, you build audience. Part of it is, you're going to have to learn how to become a promoter and a marketer. So what is that like for you? What is that process for Heather?
As someone who absolutely loathes the idea of social media, I decided to pick a career that is completely dependent on social media for it to be successful. So, it's fine. But what my biggest thing is Instagram Reels. So a very wise person, Alan Lazarus from NLU University, once told me, you pick your three social media platforms and you get really, really good at those. You don't have to do all of them. I think I have one YouTube short. I've gotten good at Instagram Reels, TikToks, and I actually need to post the podcast a little bit more on TikTok. TikTok's more of like my fun space. But it also boosted me as a content creator because I knew the platform had to get out. So I was streaming on TikTok, like promoting the podcast. And that's honestly why it is where it is today. It's changed a lot since the shutdown when it comes to reach and stuff like that. And it's just, now it's just for funsies and not for like any kind of income-based anything. But TikTok, Instagram Reels, and then if you have a podcast, make yourself a Facebook page, not a group. A group is good for like creating a community, especially if you're in the more mental health or entrepreneurship or that kind of thing. Like, yes, create that Facebook group because that's going to make people feel closer to you. You're going to feel closer to your people. That's also how you can kind of get your listener feedback and figure out what's working and what doesn't, because that's where I heard from a lot of people like, hey, you're getting kind of surface level. And I'm like, noted. But that Facebook group or Facebook page, like, I know people are like, oh, I'm just a small podcaster. I just started. Like, I'm not, this big influencer. Like, why would I do a Facebook page? Just do the damn Facebook page and make sure your stuff is sent on there. Post. I know it sounds redundant. You're going to get comments at Thanksgiving about how you think you're an influencer or you think you're this or that. They're not doing much of anything either. So just post, because eventually there's going to be that one post that starts that traction. And you're going to be doing this for a year to a year and a half before you see anything, literally anything. And you just have to keep staying the course. So as long as you're consistent and you have your big three that you can consistently post on at least once a week, be posting on your stories daily, even if it's just checking in, like a call to action, like, oh, I've been feeling pretty like down today. What's your mood been this week? That kind of thing. Like, even if nobody, trust me, I am still in the spot where like I get maybe one person that responds to my call to action. You just keep it up. Because eventually more people are going to respond, and ask me anything. Do you know how many ask me anythings I've done on Instagram where I got zip? It happens. You keep going. You pretend that you belong at the table that you're trying to be at, and a lot changes.
Yes. Right. And that's the thing that for most of the people that I've had on is that it is for new podcasters getting into it, the understanding that this is a long game.
Such a long game.
If you're looking for the immediate turnover results and you're expecting an ROI right away, just because you spent, $5,000 on equipment and lighting and everything's great, you might have even hired a social media team. You're not going to get that kind of attraction unless you're already a known quantity or a celebrity or somebody that's already have an existing following into moving something. And even those aren't guaranteed that you're going to find the sustainable success that everybody thinks. I can sit down behind the microphone. I am the one. Like it's a long game. And all the podcasters that I've had on, they tell you, I feel like I didn't hit my stride until like I was into episode 200. And that
honestly,
floors people. They're like, what? 200 episodes before you find a stride? It's like,
yep. I am just starting to find it at 120 episodes in.
Yeah.
Just starting to find it. And I've been doing this for almost 3 years. It takes a really long time to find your groove, find your consistency level, find you're worth it kind of deal. But also, like you were saying with the celebrity thing, like for having a podcast as a celebrity, but even having a celebrity guest on, unless that 1000% coincides with the niche that you're in, it's not going to do too much for your numbers. Like that particular episode may see higher numbers, but overall, it's not going to. I have gone viral 3 times on TikTok, and I mean over 1 million views viral. That has done jack shit for my numbers. Pardon my French. It has done not much. It's done more in like followers. Like I got 3,000 followers from it. But if you think about it, I've had a total of, let's say 5 million views on all of these and only an increase of 3,000 followers.
Yeah.
You know? And then the engagement and stuff like that. Like everyone thinks that their big viral moment is going to be their big moment. And really it's what you do with it. Because unfortunately, when you hit that viral moment, you have to have the level of everything that goes with that viral moment. And not everybody has it. I know I don't. I know I don't. So for me, it's like, yes, having these bigger guests is like mind blowing. Like, what do you mean you want to talk to me? But I also have learned and continue to learn and just know that that's not going to be my big podcast break. It's going to be like I talked about earlier in the episode, like the Girls of the Toast, where you're building your foundation from the ground up. Because if you do have that viral moment that makes your podcast big for a minute, you have to sustain that. And that's really hard to do. You want that. You know, we listened to the Tortoise and the Hare as a kid. You know, everyone did. Everyone knows that story. We just thought it was a fable, like something of, oh, you know, and then you get into an industry like podcasting, like you and me, where you realize you have to be the freaking tortoise. And all of a sudden, it's just not a fun story we knew as kids.
Right. Like even you made mention, this is what you made mention of early in the interview, like you just started using an outro. And you've been doing it for 3 years. I had somebody that was into episode 1200, and he was like, he'd been doing this since 2012. Like he'd started like right when podcasting was getting started, and he's like, I just started using a guest vetting system 3 years ago, and I go, oh my, like 3 years ago, but it's insane. But it took that long. To figure out, like going through, and these are the unspoken things that I want new podcasters to understand. They come in and listen. This is what you should be drawing from knowledge, right? All the technical stuff. Yes, I'm going to talk about all the technical stuff too, because those are the questions that arise first. The first ones are, what mic do I have? All that stuff comes first. But then there's the small ancillary things like what you just made mention of. What is my foundation? Do I have, you know, what if I do go viral 2 months in? Is that going to be sustainable? Because do I have everything developed? Right? It takes time. And I'm sorry, guys, if you're trying to bypass or hack the system, you'll learn that's not how it's going to work. If it does, you might find the rare cases. They are the exception. They are not the rule to do here as podcasters. So this is the fun part. This is the fun part, Heather, that I love to get to talk about too, is that what's going on for you now that you're 120 episodes in. You've made a transition in pivoting how you approach your content. What do you see for the next, hopefully 100 episodes for your show?
I really just see now that I am kind of going back to my roots of why I started this. You know, again, this is the fun thing. You're going to get lost in what you're doing sometimes. Like I have loved every single meditation coach that I've had on, but it's also not really what I wanted to focus on. And I had to take a hard look in the mirror and be like, okay, I need to bring it back to, I want other people's like deep, unfiltered stories. And in doing that, unfortunately, you cut out a lot of like pod people, but you're more comfortable with yourself. So I think the fun, and it is fun. Like when you really get that light bulb moment of, no, this is the direction. It's so freaking fun because it feels like the biggest like weight off your shoulders. And you're like, now I get to have fun with this. Now I get to really do what I want to do and, you know, move forward. So I think the next 100 episodes, you're going to see 100 more stories of people that have been through it and saw the other side or are working on seeing the other side. And that is why I started this, because I have always said, if I reach one person that said, I feel seen, I feel heard, I feel understood, I could stop podcasting tomorrow and be completely happy.
Ooh, I love that. So have you ever thought, just, you know, thinking out loud,
Oh, yeah.
taking these experiences and, seeing how you did start out writing a blog. Have you ever thought about going back to either doing that or writing a book, or taking these experiences, what you've learned from the stories of others, to kind of help develop and share a little bit more about your story too? Because that's part of it too, as a podcaster. It's
Yeah,
like opening up about.
I keep getting crap from people that I need to start opening up about myself a little more. And I think it's the people pleaser and like the eldest daughter in me that I want other stories to be first and, not focus on my own. But also, like, I've been doing a lot of healing in the last couple of years of coming to terms with my story as a whole. And sometimes that actually makes it less fun to talk about, because I'm like, I'm in a good place with like this person that caused me that trauma. So talking about it, as much as like it would help people, it's like, is it going to help me? So I have to kind of, is it going to help my relationship with that person, that we're cool now? Do I really want to go back there? So for me, I think I definitely want to do more solo episodes and more episodes that are more me, because that's the thing. People are like, we don't know anything about you. And I'm like, I mean, you do, just the fun parts. So I think you will definitely see more solo from me and stuff like that. Like, I've, massively opened up about how I became disabled and all of my medical surgical stuff with that. So that was like a big one that was terrifying. Going with a story of that, because that's a big one. We have a huge disability community in the US and around the world, and I have a voice. I should be speaking out on it more and talking about the complications and the things but again, it's like, I'm working on that myself, because I have so much respect for my guests that hop on a mic and are just like, yeah, here's all of my shit out in the open, because it's really hard for me to do that sometimes. I can do it when I'm like angry or I feel a little more righteous and I'm like, hell yeah, we're going to get on the mic and we're going to talk. And then I think about it and I'm like, so we're working on more getting myself out there more and, getting on par with my guests. But for now, we're still a work in progress with that one.
Hey, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's part of the journey.
Mm-hmm.
If it comes a time down that path and you're like, okay, now's the time to open up about it.
Exactly.
And of course it will, but at least it's just thought, because I have all the podcasters who come on, and
Mm-hmm.
to me, that's part of the story too, is that a lot of them will highlight their guests. They will highlight people come on and express, and they're, seeing people come on and being able to share their vulnerabilities like that to me, that's kind of a strength.
Yeah.
But as a host, you do have that strength as well. And I try to encourage other hosts to say, you are a part of this program. And, part of the reason that people tune in a lot, yeah, it might be the guest, might be the topic, but it is you as well.
It's so hard to remember that as a host sometimes, because you're like, I'm just a vessel for other people's stories. And then people are like, that's great, but like, what about you? And you're like, what about me?
Right. You tell them like, how you doing today? And like, I'm fine.
Mm-hmm.
As a host, that would drive you nuts. You're like, how you doing today? And your guest is like, oh, I'm fine.
Right. It's like I am my own worst guest, and most hosts are.
Look, that's part of what I've done for myself as a host myself, is that I knew I had to start sharing me. I started doing this 2018, and it was, hey, I had so many great guests on, but then I started to have people who would say, we like it too when you just talk about yourself. And I'm like, really? Okay.
Right. I don't think I'm that interesting.
Exactly. But you are. There's more to it. Okay. Thank you, Heather. I do appreciate you taking the time, all the gratitude in the world. And I will be reaching out to you once we get closer to scheduling these things, because I did an insane thing where I recorded like 25 people, like within
I've done that.
Tried to do that.
Yep.
And I did overwhelm myself with a lot of it, but hitting a tail end of the recording part of this part, and now it's going to be like putting them out, and I have enough now flexible timeline for myself to now start being able to push out a little bit more on the technical side, because what you've shared today. Okay. Thank you, Heather.
All right. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
If today's conversation reminded you that every creator starts somewhere, make sure to follow the show and subscribe wherever you're listening. And if you connected with Heather's story, you can check out her podcast, Hot Mess Espresso, on both Apple Podcasts and Spotify. You can also follow Heather and the show on Instagram at hotmess.espresso and at heather.herrington. One of the biggest takeaways from this episode is that growth doesn't come from waiting until you feel ready. It comes from being willing to learn publicly, create imperfectly, and keep showing up anyway. Because nobody starts polished, and every creator you admire once sounded like a beginner too. Thanks for listening to Podcast About Podcasting with Gabe Leal. And remember, your first version doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to exist. We'll see you in the next episode.
If you've been listening to this show, you already know the audio quality isn't an accident. Those intros and outros? Created with 11 Labs. And no, I didn't spend a fortune or waste hours in a studio to get there. 11 Labs gives you access to a massive catalog of professional-grade voices, or you can clone your own. Either way, you get broadcast-quality sound that makes your content feel legitimate from the first second. Right now, you can start a free trial and get 10,000 credits for just $11 a month. That's professional-level audio production for less than 2 cups of coffee. Click the link in the show notes and start elevating your creative process today.